Good evening, everyone. My name is Iliana Franklin, and I'm the lead tutor for master courses in storyboarding and previs at Escape Studios. And today I have the honor to host a webinar with one of the most prolific story artists and directors from Los Angeles, Sergio Paez.
Thank you. That's
Sergio,
beautiful.
welcome, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Just to
Iliana, it's a
introduce,
pleasure.
pleasure for us too. Why don't I leave the introduction to you? Maybe you can start with telling us about your journey in the industry and a few words about what you're doing currently. Um,
Yeah. Of
over
course.
to you.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Iliana. And it's great. We've known each other for a long time. We worked together a while back, and it's great to reconnect. And also, welcome everybody who's watching this. It's flattering to be on here. So, yeah, basically, well, my name is Sergio. If you don't know, Sergio Paez. I've been a story artist for now, man, going on more than 20 years and working on various projects from feature to TV to freelance, VR, commercial work, video games. And I think it's all been narrative storytelling. So this is kind of the base that I've used to build my career. And now I've gotten into directing and supervising story teams and that kind of thing. It's all been great. And it's the basis of what I do is visual storytelling. And there's multiple things involved with doing that. And we can get into it. And I encourage you guys to ask all the questions you want during this time. I think if you don't mind, I'll share my screen really quickly and I'll go into, let me just set this up and I'll go into this quick presentation that I put together for Lightbox Expo, if you guys aren't familiar with that, which is a kind of industry event that happened last year. And I made this thing called 5 key storyboarding tips for success. And I think this might actually be pretty relevant for those of you guys who are interested in doing storyboarding and visual storytelling. So let me get through this and it'll go quick. So basically, this is me. I've done a number of projects, but here are a couple of the ones that I think are notable. Well, the latest like TV show I worked on and directed was Star Wars Resistance from Lucasfilm. And I also helped board out an independent movie called Little Boy, and then Star Wars Rebels. So I've been associated with Lucasfilm and Star Wars for a long time. Also the Clone Wars and a couple movies here and there. I wrote a book on visual storytelling, which Iliana showed me that you guys are, some of you have seen that, which is great. That's very flattering. And I also run storyboardart.org, which is a online visual storytelling community. I invite you guys to check it out, but I'm a mentor on there as well. So just a couple of tips for you guys, because all of this that we're going to be talking about, it is kind of career focused. It is difficult to get into, but it is very, very rewarding. And I really believe that. So if you're young and you're trying to get into this stuff, I recommend that you get into visual storytelling, you really try and figure out how much you love it. And really what I'm talking about here is, young people getting into this and maybe artists with experience. I'm not exactly sure what everybody's background is, but we can get into some of that stuff. So the first tip I want to tell you is, one, be a master of your tools. And we can get into some of those details, but really there's a number of tools that you want to be using, not only technical, but also visual, because there's like visual storytelling related. By Kitty. And that, so there's cinematography involved, there's drawing skills, there's composition, and all of that put together is really what you need to do as a visual storyteller and story artist. And so become a master at it. You really want to learn and get into that and figure out how you can really master those tools to be able to communicate well what you're trying to do. One other suggestion here is to learn about writing and story structure. So this is something that you may not have come up. I find it's rare that people actually mention this because we're so focused on the visual arts and learning how to draw. But story structure is really, really important. And I can talk to you about some of those pillars if you want. But writing we're writing with pictures, we're writing with images. And so it is writing in a sense where we're putting something before, constructing a path of the story. And that's also really important. The next tip I have for you guys is to get emotional. get emotional with your storytelling, because I really believe that the basis, the foundation for all the stories that we do is character emotion, and understanding where that character motivation comes from and where those emotional feelings come from and how to show that visually. That's very important, is how to show that visually. So that's the tip on the emotion part. Always remember that even if you're doing an action sequence or you're doing something technical, you got to remember what is driving all of that. And to me, it's really the emotion behind it. Okay. This is an interesting tip that, you know, is not often given, but we talk a lot about this in storyboard art, is really learn the business of storytelling. So you're going to have to, if you want to work in this, if you want to make this a career, which is very possible, there's many, many avenues nowadays for people to get into the entertainment industry, the film industry, that you should learn how. You should learn how to do it, how to be a pro, how to present yourself, what kind of strategies to use to apply to companies. And that's something that I think is not often talked about. Rates, you know, how much you should be charging for certain jobs, how you charge, you know, what kind of invoices and things that you can put together. That kind of stuff is very important too. So learn about the business of storytelling. And lastly, I just want to mention this. You really have to have a passion for learning. So I'm assuming many of you guys have come in this because you love doing animation, you might love filmmaking. And so this is one way that you just want to never forget that this is a lifetime of learning that you're going to be doing. And I still consider myself somebody who has to constantly learn and be on top of my game and really learn from others, be open to suggestions, new software, new techniques, new methods, because those constantly change. And that it's never this idea that you've arrived or that you can finally relax, because the enjoyment of what we do should come from that learning, that discovery, that experimentation, that problem solving. It's a lot of what we do in visual storytelling. Oh, and I have this shameless plug. This is great. Don't worry about the training because that's actually not open yet. I can talk about that later. This is again from another presentation, but come see us at storyboardart.org. And that's all, you know, that you can sign up for free and that kind of stuff. And if you want, I can talk about a little bit of what we do there. But that's basically what I wanted to do for a little bit of an intro to answer some questions there. But maybe what we can do here is get into some of the questions that you guys had prepared for me, and take it from there. I also have some beautiful student work and very inspiring student work that you guys did that we can also get into that if you like.
Thank you, Sergio. This was very, very nice to see introduction of your work. And I would like to give you here a little bit of challenging questions that were thrown at us from students. So the first one would be, why did you choose the storyboarding profession?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, I grew up loving film and animation and just cartoons. I would watch that stuff when I was a kid, and I always liked to draw. My brother liked to draw, and so I kind of followed him and copied him. And then when I discovered that you could actually do this for a living, you know, later on, probably like in high school when I was in my teenage years, I tried very hard to figure out how to get there. So I started in art school and did that. So I went down to the art path, right? So when I got into doing, I always wanted to be an animator. And when I started doing animation, and actually when we first met, I was also doing a little bit of animation, Iliana, in Spain when
I
we worked
remember
at
that.
Animagic Studios, which is great fun. But then I discovered that I really have much more of a passion for storyboarding. So what happened was the 2D animation work that I was interested in kind of dried up. And so because I wanted to use my 2D animation and drawing skills, I got into doing storyboarding. And I found that I really enjoy doing that much more than I actually like doing animation. Now I still love animation, but I haven't done it in a long time. That focuses on acting and, you know, the performance of a character. But to me, as a story artist, you can design the experience for a user, and you really have much more control over the visuals of what you're seeing in a project. That doesn't mean it's better or worse than any other discipline out there. Everything is very important because it's all a team effort. But I think that as a story artist, you're really close to the top when it comes to creating the ideas. And that to me is really, really exciting to be able to manipulate that stuff.
Excellent, excellent. And how much influence did you have in your experience as a story artist over the project that you've been working? Can you compare the experience being an animator and storyboard artist? How much control did you have working
Yeah.
on projects? That's an interesting one as well.
Yeah, for sure. You know, as an animator, what you get, you get a shot. You get basically a scene to develop, and you're working with characters, and you do talk about emotion and trying acting, but you're in one element of the bigger project. As a story artist, what you do is you control the sequence at least, or the scene at a certain level. So there's many shots that you have to compile, and you have to figure out the character motivations and the path throughout that scene. Now, when you're working on a project, you're probably going to be doing multiple scenes, so you have a lot more influence with the project by doing that. So to me, that was much more exciting because I could pitch ideas. I could possibly, you know, depending on the project, but you could suggest dialogue. You can manipulate the camera, which is to me really, really important when it comes to visual storytelling. Where you place the camera is hugely important. So that being able to be the person that says, well, the camera should be wide right here, or no, we're going to go in close and do a close up. And, you know, of course you're working with the team and directors, and there's other supervisors and stuff most of the time, but it's your task, it's your responsibility to take full control over that scene. Just as an animator, your responsibility is just that shot and that character. So to me, that is a big responsibility, because if you don't get that scene right, no amount of good animation will save that scene. Or, you know, if the story isn't good in a film, I don't think there's any good special effects that can save this the movie. It's going to be not a fun movie, not an entertaining movie, and I think we've all seen that. So to me, as a story person, that is really the exciting part, to be able to go that path and kind of manipulate those things.
That's very interesting. And how do you advise, from your point of view, to start learning the visual language? You're talking in your book about the visual language, and this is something that students are really interested in learning. What does it entail?
Yeah, that's really, you know, I don't find people focus on that as much until you actually get down and have to do the work in a story team. Is that the importance of learning the visual language and the film language. I think watching films, really just watching movies. I think there's plenty of good books out there on film structure, story structure, that kind of stuff. I can, you know, tell you a couple of my favorites, but really, I think watching movies, but really watching, which analyzing films. So anybody can watch a film and just enjoy it, right, on an entertainment level. I think it is understanding why it makes you feel good, why it makes you feel happy, sad, scared at a certain point. Is it the camera work? Is it the performance of the character? Is it the lighting that they're doing? And putting all those things together, and at the, to me, it's at the shot level. So knowing if the camera is wide, it has a certain effect. If the camera is close to the character, to the object, has a certain effect, and when to make a choice as to what to show next. And of course, there's also pacing involved, and rhythm and timing, which as a story artist, you get to touch that a little bit in animatics and making, you know, your sequence now more than ever, I think. But I think that film language part is so hugely important. And I think everybody's a filmmaker, really. I think this is a general tip, is that you should all be students of film history. Like, you really should watch the classics. Oh, by the way, it's my cat. He always comes to my presentations. This is Richard the cat. At any rate, you know, watching the classics, understanding why those things were important in film history, and then applying those things to, if you're a story artist, you're going to be directly applying those principles to your sequences. If you are even a lighter, animator, modeler, anything like that, you still need to know what makes good filmmaking, what makes good composition. So I really am a big fan of learning your film history and your film structure.
And how about the drawing skills? How important are they for an artist in story? There is this perception lately that with the technology, with transforming your storyboard into 3D, there is a problem with capturing correctly the perspective. How do you solve this problem in your process of working? How do
Yeah,
you make sure that the camera is actually working as a real camera in your storyboards?
right. That's a really good point. I think well, I'm kind of old school. I come from the 2D drawing days, and I still think that everybody who becomes a story artist should understand and have really strong drawing skills that you've developed over many years of practice, and that your perspective is one of those things that you work on a lot, so you know how to correctly draw your perspective, 1.2 and 3-point perspective at least. And getting into like the warp camera lenses with like a 5-point perspective, you'd want to know exactly what that means. And so I think it's hugely important, because as a story artist especially, I still believe you can draw much faster than you can model and create in the computer. I do use the computer in 3D for certain things. We did a lot of previs when we were on the Clone Wars and at Lucasfilm doing the Star Wars stuff. But the drawing is really a fast way of communicating something. And you should have that shorthand, that quick drawing ability to be able to do that. And perspective is huge. So really, if you get down to it though, what you should be doing is communicating an idea. It really doesn't matter how you communicate that idea, whether you do it with toothpicks or stop motion or with a drawing or with 3D. But to me, I just pick whatever's faster and whatever's easier to communicate that idea. After a while, I truly believe it's like that whole contest, like what's faster, can you draw it faster or can you do it on the computer? Now, obviously the computer offers a lot of realism. There's shortcuts when you actually have something modeled, that when you place the camera there, it's going to be a lot more accurate to what you're doing. But you should build up your drawing skills so that you can accurately draw a wide camera lens versus a long telephoto lens, and that's nicely represented in your drawings. And I think there's ways to do that with the tools that you have. That's kind of what I was referring to in the tip: be a master of your tools, right?
What are your favorite tools, Sergio? I understand that you are now trying to work with VR technology and trying to create a small project of your own. Is that something you can
Yes.
tell us about a little bit more?
Yeah. For a while, I've been working on a narrative virtual reality project. We shot it in live action, of course, using 360 cameras. There are visual effects involved, so it's that's part of the technical challenge, is combining those visual effects in VR with the live action plates. So it's taken us a while. Of course, this is a kind of a love project, a side project. So in between jobs is when we jump on this. We're starting to get the final touches on that. I did come up with a concept and board out all of that. And VR has certain tools there, but I'll just talk generally about some of the technical tools that I use. Is certainly I think, and I'll relate this to what I think you guys should probably also learn for those who want to get into this. Is Photoshop, I think, is pretty the classic program that if you know Photoshop, you can probably learn everything else that's out there in the marketplace, because the interface is going to be similar to many other programs out there. Also, there are many artists. I still use Photoshop to storyboard completely. That is a complete program that you can do a full sequence in. Even they have a timeline feature now, which is actually pretty good. I mean, I think I would prefer other programs to do a timeline stuff, but you can still get a lot done in Photoshop. Toon Boom is another program that is really popular. I've used that a bunch to do animatics. It's Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. There's different software packages they have. The Storyboard Pro package you can draw and create an animatic at the same time, which is really a good time saver. A lot of TV studios are doing that, and you're seeing more animatics being produced a lot faster. What other TV Paint is another one that I really like as far as a drawing tool. But you really don't need anything fancy. Like, I've used Autodesk Sketchbook, which is a free program. These are all digital tools, by the way. Pencil and paper. Like, I still have a sketchbook somewhere on my desk around here that I still do pencil and paper. And if I need to, I'll scan it in. Or if I'm working on set or something, I'll do a quick marker drawing. to show the direct. Sometimes, people have the iPad that they carry around and stuff like that. That's great, but if the battery runs out, the light's shining there, the sun is, it's not exactly, sometimes it might not be ideal. Certainly great because you can draw something and email it really quickly to somebody else. But those are some of the programs. A couple other ones I think I'll mention are like the 3D tools. If you're going to do any 3D, you should probably learn Blender because it's really simple. Well, it's not simple, but it is free. I use Maya, of course. I've used like the game engines like Unity and Unreal. They're all, if you understand a 3D package, you can pretty much pick up any of those. But Blender, I think, is the flavor of the month because it is open source. And well, is it open source? But it's, at least it's free. You can download it for free. And then you can do previs and you can do a lot of cool. There's a really cool, like, kind of storyboarding previs tools that you can use for Blender.
Yeah, we tried it in the classroom previously. It was very interesting, actually, to see the hybrid method of working with the greasy pencil and the 3D environment there. There is a question here, actually, which is, again, about the challenges when boarding for different mediums and different styles, from animated TV shows to live action films to video games. What is the difference? Would you be able to share with us your experience in this area? How do they differ? What is the challenge for boarding for games, for example? We have video games projects, and students are asking me, how do you board for this? How do you write for this kind of genre? So it would be interesting to share your experience in this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think my approach is really the same for most all of these projects. I'm usually always concerned with like what the story is about, even on a video game project. Most of the time when I worked in video games, I worked on the cinematics. So those are the cutscenes between the actual gameplay. I have boarded out gameplay, which is kind of a fun, it's a kind of a technical exercise because there's not much like emotional stuff going on with the characters necessarily. It depends on the game, of course, but like you're drawing out the path of how a character or a tank or something might go in the game. The cutscenes, though, the cinematics are something that I've done a lot of, and yeah, that one I consider those like little mini movies. So I'll board those out just like I will board out any short film or any sequence. And I usually, my technical way of storyboarding is kind of a continuity board style. I will board out every beat and the major poses of the shots so that I can put them in an animatic. I'm usually always, for whatever reason, I was always, I think it looks much better when you can construct something in an animatic. You can see the timing, you can see the flow. So all my drawings are usually built that way. Now, for live action, you see a lot of people do a different style where you show a lot more arrows. It's less poses, less beats, and then you're doing more descriptive camera angles with like kind of almost like concept boards shot. So they're major beats of the scene. And now I actually don't do much of that. I kind of avoid doing the arrows and stuff. I actually enjoy doing the character stuff. So even for feature films, like that Little Boy film that I worked on, I boarded out the whole sequence as if it were like a 2D animation or like a Pixar film in a way, where you're going to do a full animatic. They actually asked for animatics. Let me get rid of my cat here. He's getting restless. Okay. So my method actually is very consistent depending on all the projects. On a feature, you get more time. So then you have more time to develop the scene. And usually the time gets shorter and shorter as the deadline comes up. So you have to like rush towards the end. But on a TV show, you're like rushing the whole way through, but at least, we're like on the Clone Wars and the Resistance stuff, we were always creating story reels. So we were creating footage that would go to editorial and that we would manipulate it that way. And we go back and forth from the drawing table to the editing room where we're creating those animatics. So now that doesn't mean, there's any one way to do this. That's just the way that I've done it. The reason that I prefer doing it in this kind of continuity way, where you're showing a lot of poses and all the scenes kind of hook up, is because you have a much better idea of what the timing and the pacing will be in the animatic, which gets a really, really close blueprint for what you need for the project. Yeah.
So you partly answered this question of what was like working at Lucasfilm doing Star Wars. This is a question from Joseph C. Perez on the question and answer list. So I'm just wondering, how did you feel like working for
Yeah, you
Lucasfilm?
know, that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I've had a great, I've had a like a really great opportunity in my career to work at some very, you know, high profile places. I was at Pixar for a while, and then I've spent many years at Lucasfilm, and I worked at Skywalker Ranch, which is like, you know, the place where George Lucas has his production facility. And the reason we were there was because when Clone Wars initially started, George was still at the company and he was supervising the project. Now he, you know, Dave Filoni was the supervising director on that project, who has now moved on to doing other things. He's one of the guys involved with The Mandalorian right now. So the process that we started was very much and this is why it was important to understand the filmmaking aspect of it. Because of all the history that George Lucas had, he's very much a live action film director, and whatever opinion you have of the Star Wars movies, some, you know, kind of came out okay, some have, you know, for whatever flaws they have, they're very much based on other films that inspired George, right? So when we would come up with these episodes for Clone Wars or Rebels, that we would think of them very much as these little mini movies, and that mindset of creating footage and understanding like the characters. Now it was a very accelerated pace because at a TV show, it's like you write it, you go to the boarding part, you know, the boarding phase. You only have a certain amount of time to you know, take the script and then create images out of it. Then that goes directly to the editing room, and you only get like 1 or 2 revisions till you actually get to the final place. Then at the time, George Lucas was supervisor, so he would review these things and he'd be like, well, you know what, I don't like this act, and he would change the whole act. You know, there's usually 3 acts in a small episode like that. By doing that, he'd send the whole thing to a rewrite, and then you'd have to do it all over again. At that point, it'd probably get rewritten in-house without writers, and we would do it in the story team. But you're rushing, you're working late to get that to the deadline, because the deadlines didn't change. He just threw the changes out there. So it was really exciting. It's a very luxurious studio. You know, all these places like Pixar and Lucasfilm have all the facilities that you would need to create the project there. It's a wonderful environment where you're around other really strong creative people, and you are pushed to really do the best work you can. There is no idea of compromise when it comes to the schedule. I mean, you really want to put as much as you can and as much love and attention into the story sequence that you can with the time you have. Now, sometimes you do okay, and sometimes, well, you know, it doesn't come out the way you would have hoped, but that's part of the process. So regardless, though, that doesn't mean we do any less effort. I mean, I think everybody involved there, the whole team, the people that I worked with, were all super passionate about creating the project. And I think that was very contagious and fun to be a part of.
That is really interesting experience. And here is another interesting question which I would like to put forward. What is the first thing you think about when starting a frame? For example, lighting, composition. What do you think first, Sergio?
Oh man, that's a really good question. The first thing I think about is, what does the audience need to see right now? What is the story point? I don't care about composition. I don't care about lighting. I don't care about clothing, none of that set dressing. I figure, like, what I want to know is what is the emotion of the character beat that we need to see? What's the story point? Does, in the scene, for example, you might have a scene where you have 2 characters arguing. Maybe it's like some kind of a love story or something. So maybe a character arrives to a house and the other character is already there, and they begin a conversation, right? So how do we enter that scene? What are you going to do? And you'd have to come up with an idea. Now, maybe you have sets already. Maybe you have a location design already. Maybe you don't. So then you'd have to think about, you'd have to come up with your imagination. Well, what's the best place that I could stage this this conversation, this argument that they're about to have. And is it going to be in the kitchen? Is it going to be in the living room? Are they going to move from the kitchen to the living room? Maybe they're outside in the patio. Maybe they're out in the front lawn. Maybe one guy's mowing the lawn. Who knows, right? But you have to come up with the idea that will fit with the idea. Now, this is if you have just a blank page and somebody has just given you this idea. Is like, what the first thing you think of? Well, I'm thinking about what story point is really important to show the audience. Now, realistically, though, most of the time, if you're working on a project, you're going to have some kind of outline or script. Usually somebody else has given that idea. I think it's a great opportunity, and this is a great exercise too, to create an idea on your own. And I think a lot of the project that I think that you sent me, Iliana, were I would just assume that there are a lot of personal stories that came and people are coming up with their own concepts. That's really difficult. It's very hard to do that. So I commend all of you guys who are doing that. But yeah, the first thing I really want to think about is like, where are we going to be? What is the message that I want to tell, and how am I going to show that? And you do that through the tools that we talked a little bit earlier about: the camera work, the wide versus medium shots, the close-ups, all of those combination of film language.
That is interesting. Does your work haunt you in the night? Can you sleep when you work on a project?
Yeah, this is I've had this discussion with a bunch of people. It's like, this is more of a vocation. It's not a job. Like, I didn't sign up for a job to like clock in at 9 and clock out. If you want to do that, go to Starbucks, go to like a bank. That's the kind of job you go to where you go home, you forget about it. This is a lifestyle choice where I've chosen to jump into something that's very passionate, and the reason I say this, like, you can consider it a job. I don't think those people last very long. I think eventually you kind of just dry up and you become this old geezer that doesn't want to learn, like those things that I mentioned before, that you be curious because you're just worried about, I'm clocking in and I'm clocking out. I'm going to go see my family here, which is all good. You want the life-work balance. But I'm talking about, to me, this is like the people that are really, really into this, that I think really excel, the ones that have reached a very high level of proficiency, are the ones that really live and breathe this every day. So when you talk about, it's a funny question, but it's really true. You go home and you think, man, how do I solve that problem? You might go home and do homework, like not because somebody's telling you, but you're like, man, I gotta find that movie. You look on Netflix or Amazon or something, now if you have it in your own like DVD library, you're like, what was that film that I thought, you look at it and you say, oh man, I could use something here for this project I'm working on. So like your brain is never turning off, coming up with ideas and being creative. I think that's part of the fun. Now if you take it too far to the deep end and you go crazy, it's like, that's not good either. Cause like I said, you want to have a work-life balance, right? So you do want to have a life. One thing about that though, I should say this, that the more life you have, the more that you actually get out and you experience life. Okay. I just say that in general. The more you can bring that to your stories, because those are like, did you fall in love? Did you break up? And your heart is like on the floor in pieces. Like, what does that feel like? How can you put that into your story? Right. Maybe that'll help you get over your breakup. But like, did you go hiking? Did you go mountain climbing? Like, what was that like? Do you remember, people who like, for example, I know a good buddy who's really into Kung Fu. He loves martial arts. And so he's watched all the movies. He used to practice martial arts. And so guess what? He's a martial arts expert. So then when he does an action scene, he knows all the moves. He knows how to position the characters. He knows the difference between the different styles, right? If you're going to do an MMA style versus a ninja versus a Navy SEAL, that you can show that visually, that he knows the differences between that. So like, have you guys seen that film, The Queen's Gambit, right? With, or it's a TV series on Netflix with the chess playing, right? So, I mean, you would really have to do your research on chess and understand like what happens there. And the way they made that so exciting, I just find it a wonderful, wonderful experience that they did there, because it's a beautiful visual thing. They made what is the most boring thing you can think of, is playing chess, to like, they made it exciting. And I thought that was fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of stuff you got to be doing.
That's really a good example, and we have lots of research going online, but not so much lately getting out. So
Oh,
it
right.
is a good advice.
Yeah, pandemic wise, it's a little hard, but you know.
Yes, there are lots of questions still coming out, and people are very excited about this talk. And I just wonder whether we should move on a little bit towards the feedback. Maybe if you want to give a little bit of feedback of what we've been
Yes, let me
finding,
do that. Let me
and then we can come back to the questions after, maybe.
okay, let me pull this up. I'll share my screen again if you don't mind.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. I'll turn off my camera.
oh, that's okay. Let's see here. So I have this list of stuff, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this up one by one, and I hope that you have seen these before, because I'm kind of going to go through them pretty quickly. So this one's by Molly. Wonderful, wonderful example here. Let me turn the volume down a little bit. Oh, that's pretty good. So at any rate, you got a short film here. This is really awesome the way you've done it. Now, what's funny is that the title of this is animatic. What you've done here is like animatic version. I would consider this like almost a rough animation because this is so really well developed. You don't have to put that many poses when creating an animatic. Really what you want to do is show the major beats and the major turning points of emotion for the characters. Now, overall with this sequence, hopefully you guys can share this with each other later on if you haven't seen it, but I'll go forward a little bit. Basically, you have, you know, 3 little birdies and they're, looks like mama bird, and they all kind of hatch. Kind of my general comments, and I have this for a bunch of people, is that I feel like the drawings are great. The execution is really nice. I feel like the timing of some of the jokes and the gags could be a little bit tighter. And I think, you know, let me see if I can go to a section and point out an example. Like even on this, like this bird has fallen from the tree and he wants to get back up to his family. And then later on, we're gonna get more danger. There's a lot of shots and there's a lot of time that happens between actually getting to the message of, oh wait, there's the desire to go back and you can't go back, right? So I think I'm a fan of just cutting to the chase and getting to the point and being very efficient with storytelling so that you can let the audience spend time on things that are actually really important. So you can shorten and you can lengthen things depending on how important they are. And to me, I would choose the character moments to do that, you know, to do that manipulation. Now, this is kind of a gag, you know, funny, you know, short film here. So I think the other thing that just comment is like to get that timing really snappy when it comes to the gags. Like a beat happens and I feel like there's a couple of frames where there's a little bit of a lag between either the change of expression or the punchline, so to speak, or the reveal of the gag. Let me go forward here to where the cat shows up. So the cat shows up and eats the bird that has fallen, basically. So now the bird is in this cat's mouth. So I feel like, one, it's really funny that you get all these poses. The first thing I think about, man, that's a really strong bird. So like, so I was almost asking, like, is this like a super bird? Like, because it would be impossible for any little like newborn chick to be able to like move a cat's mouth. I think maybe what you might want to consider is that the shape of the cat's like jaw kind of just expands and contracts as the bird starts to kick within the mouth. And then the cat just opens up his jaws and then kind of looks in, or, you know, with his eyes kind of looks down, and then we see what's going on. But that it would just seem a little unlikely that the bird is like so strong that you could pry the jaws open. At any rate, this goes on for a minute, well, a few seconds really, but I think it's a bit too long that we're drawing out this whole moment. And of course, mother activates here, and then there's like the save that happens. And I feel like that could probably happen a little bit faster with that. So anyway, I'll wrap up my notes on this one, but I think in general, looking awesome. You might want to revise some of the timing and the way that you're executing some of your gags on that. All right, how about we go to the next one? Now this one, let me turn down the volume on this too. This was really cute. I love it. We have another cat involved in this one. Now the setup is fun. Oh, by the way, this is one note that I'll just give you guys is like, when you're gonna show or export an animatic like this, get rid of all this title safe and all the arrows and stuff on your storyboards. In an animatic, that's the whole point, is that you don't have to show these guides. You're showing as if it were a finished project. So I know Toon Boom will like kind of, they have this on by default. Figure out how to turn that off. And the only thing you're showing is the final composition, because I find this stuff really distracting. The other thing that we'll see an example here is that in some people leave those arrows in the animatics. Arrows, I think, are a better way to use if you're visually pitching these things image per image. But when you put them in animatic, get rid of those arrows, because what you're showing is the actual pose to pose, and it's really distracting to see arrows and stuff. You'll probably never see that on feature boards. And for this exercise, it's probably a good habit to do that. Anyway, that was a general note. The other one, let me just move forward here. Basically what happens, this little kitten comes through, and there's a moment where the cat, by the way, this is also funny. We see the cat and, oh, sorry, let me back up a little bit. So we see the cat arrive, and then the cat is like, right here, just falls into this plate. And so I'm like, man, that's a really tiny cat. It's basically the opposite effect of what was happening. I think you would still, I mean, unless the cat is also like, either this is a giant plate or it's a really tiny cat. So you might want to figure out the scale that like you would still see the cat like peek over a normal size plate or bowl, right? You might want to make that bowl bigger. At any rate, this is, and then when you go to this close-up shot, coming forward here, is right here. This is an enormous platter. So then I think the scale is way off. I think it might be funny that the actual girl like looks away, that she doesn't notice that something has arrived in her plate. And then you get like this giant cat spilling over her salad or whatever it is, right? That might be a visual gag there too. So same note with this sequence is I feel like we're just waiting for something to happen. I think you can really tighten the pacing of this to make it a lot snappier. Not snappy in the sense, but just condensing the amount of time that the audience needs to read the information. I think that might be a kind of something that we default to as story artists when we're starting out, is that like we feel like we just want to make sure that the audience understands the information we're showing, so we'll hold it for too long. And I think audiences nowadays are very sophisticated. If you show something clearly, if you show something that's well composed, that information will get logged in, right away. And then you could go on to the next moment and the next beat. All this is, I think, is great. It's really well executed, really well drawn. The other thing I would say as a comment is this girl and this cat. I find that the relationship, I'm not so sure if I find it that believable, because I would think that if a cat suddenly came to my plate, the girl's first reaction would be like, "Oh, how beautiful, how cute! There's a cute little cuddly furry thing in my plate." The way she reacts is kind of like upset that there's a cat in there. So you might have to set that up so we understand where she's coming from and why. Is she really hungry? Does she hate cats? Is the cat really aggressive? What there would make that tension happen between these two characters. So then like here's where they have like a standoff, right? Which can be funny. Now, the other thing to think about, if this really happened in a restaurant, the first thing the mother would do would be like, who is this dirty street cat in the middle of a fancy restaurant? She'd be like kicking that thing out or telling the waiter to get it out of there. So one of the things that you might want to consider is like what everybody else's reaction is. For this to actually play out the way you've done it, you might want to also explain that somehow, so that maybe the mother looks and sees that and she smiles and lets it happen, right? The waiter's first reaction is like, oh my God, I can't believe there's a cat in here. But then the mother says, wait, it's okay. let's see what happens, right? So then the waiter, even though everybody's watching, they let this unfold, right? And then it would kind of, I think, explain a little bit more of why things are the way they are. But other than that, I think this is, like, again, really nicely drawn, really well executed. Everything's very clear, which I love the way that you're using your shots. So awesome, excellent work on that one for sure. Let me go to the next one real quick. Hopefully, are we still doing good on time? I'll go to one more, and then maybe we can get back to the questions.
Yeah, we are okay.
So this one I thought was great from, let me go back and see the title here from, I think it's Gordino. I believe that's the artist. So this one I think is, so one interesting thing, I thought this was funny, it's kind of a sidetrack, but I was looking at this file is like 2 gigabytes, and yet the resolution is 720 by 480. So it's really small. So my screen here is HD. One of the things you might want to figure out why. Yeah, something weird is happening with your QuickTime export here. But the file size is enormous, yet your resolution size is tiny. So I think you might want to use a different codec or something, because you want people to see your beautiful drawings, right? And with a lightweight, file size. There's ways to get around that. I thought this story that you're planting here is really cool. Lots of drama and lots of character emotion. Very, very nice. I loved seeing that. So I'll just scroll forward and show kind of the major things that happen. I think, again, you're also executing this very well. Beautiful drawings, nice camera setups. The shots are working well. My main comment here is that I don't believe the emotions have been built up correctly. When you're doing a drama like this, that they get in so it looks like the young boy, the dad, and the grandpa all have a relationship going on. And the young boy does not have a good relationship with his father. And then but they get too heated too quick. And that's where I think you can do a lot more with cutting to the characters. For example, what happens in the first scene is this grandpa broke a dish.
Grandpa.
So I'll also pause this too, because there is a screen direction issue going on. So this is where you have to understand your film language. So he's on screen left. The kid is on screen right. You've clearly established that. But then when we go in here, boom, you cut, and the grandpa now is on screen right. And then now the kid is on screen left. So why did you flop the camera? And so why did you flop the screen direction, right? The camera's on the other side of the axis line, which I'm sure you guys have heard about at some point. At any rate, one tip there is I would use this to your advantage only when you feel it's necessary for the story. So if you're going to actually flop the screen direction, use it to emphasize a story point. Otherwise, don't do it. Just keep the screen direction consistent. In this particular case, I don't feel there's any reason to flop the screen direction. Let me keep going. Because you end up going back to the original screen direction, right? So that's where...
What happened, Grandpa?
Matteo, eat your food. Where are you going?
Marco, calm
So
down.
here's what happens is like the acceleration of emotion, I feel, happens a little bit too fast here. Now, this might be the way the script was written. It might be the style of the story. So again, this might be a comment that may or may not apply to what you're doing. But at any rate, I think what you could do, even if you can't make any script changes, is you can show more of the visual change of the emotion on the characters' faces. And so when this father character reacts in the way,
where are you going?
He goes, "Where are you going?" slams down on the table. Okay, let's assume that reaction is right for the moment. The first thing that you could probably do is show a reaction shot of the kid, and all of a sudden he's like shocked. He knows that he's expecting his dad to react that way, assuming that they have this kind of conflictive relationship. But you would show him, like, maybe get surprised, but then show his anger right away with a close-up shot. I would probably be single on this kid, and then he goes off to help his grandfather, because he shows he shows some love to the grandfather who just broke something, but nobody's paying attention to him, right? So that's my major point here. I think the intention is good. I just feel like you might want to look hard at, and this is where I'm talking about, like, pacing things out where it's important. in this particular piece where you're doing a drama, that is even more important than, let's say, comedy. Comedy, there's a little bit of forgiveness, let's say, with how you're presenting things because it's funny and it's easy. But drama, if you don't get it right, it's difficult for the audience to connect with the character emotions. So anyway, let me go forward a little bit more. All of this happens, and I feel like these conflicts build up in such a way at this point, I don't feel like I'm connected with any one of the characters. So the other thing you might want to do is pick which one is the main protagonist. And it could probably, I would think it's the kid or the grandpa. Well, probably the kid, because the grandpa eventually shows the kid, the young boy, something special, and then reveals information about the dad. So that you would make this piece more about the boy and showing those reactions and emotions, and everything kind of revolves around that perspective. And then also I only got to the point where this is a really nice story. I kind of wanted to see how this played out, but it's only this clip is only 2 minutes. So then he reveals that there's this special rope or necklace that belonged to his father. And it seems like they were going to go into the backstory of it, but it's a really good start, and you had me engaged. So I think it just needs maybe a little bit more finesse on what camera angles are you going to choose to accentuate some of those emotional beats for your characters. But awesome. I'll quit yapping about those things for now, and because I know we're getting close to the end of this, but maybe this could open it up for some more questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Sergio. This has really been very good feedback, and I think if anyone wants to join you again, maybe we can talk again about other projects in the future. I would like to give a floor to these questions because you already mentioned about the screen direction and the 180-degree rule. There is a question from Nicolo. Nicolo asks, what specific cases can the 180-degree rule be broken? That is a nice one. What would you be giving as an example for this?
There's no rules in filmmaking, really. There isn't. There's guidelines. That's one of them. There's a guideline that you should create when you have two characters, for example, or two objects. You create a relationship, a visual relationship between those two objects. Let's assume they're characters, right? That creates a 180, well, essentially 360 degree axis around those two characters. You pick one side to be on, and that's where you place your camera, and you keep that camera on that side unless there's a reason to change the camera to the other side. Now, so that's just the guideline. You can break that as much as you want. What's going to happen, there are consequences to breaking these things. You might be sacrificing clarity for the audience, because if you flop the camera from one side of that 180 line to the other, what happens is the screen positions of these characters will suddenly flop on screen. And so, like I showed in this example where you did have one, is like the character is on the right, all of a sudden now they're on the left. So you might get a jarring reaction from the audience. I think audiences nowadays are also really sophisticated. There's my cat again, reinforcing what I'm talking about, is that audiences nowadays are really sophisticated. So they'll pick that up. They may not understand, they not know the term 180 rule and stuff, but they'll know that something weird happened. So when you can break it, I think there are a number of ways you can do it. Well, let's call it that you can move the camera to the other side of the 180. There's a number of ways you can do that by showing the character actually move from one side of the screen to the other on screen. You just have the character walk across the screen. You can have the camera do the same thing and move the camera across to the other side. So now the characters have now switched positions. You can also cut away to a couple other shots, a neutral shot somewhere else, and then come back to the same scene, but now the scene is in a different position. If you do that, though, I do that with caution, because if you go back to the same scene and you've now flopped the screen direction, there should be a reason for it. So this is what I would emphasize, is that whenever you are intending to change the screen direction, that you justify it by a reason in the story. That would be my advice, is that the story dictates why you would actually change your screen direction. Now you've probably seen a bunch of movies already, like even the greats like Spielberg and Kubrick and all these guys will on occasion, like it just happens. I don't know why sometimes that the screen direction flops. Now I would sometimes argue there are filmmakers that do that on purpose. They flop the screen direction on purpose to create a jarring effect in the scene, and you use that to your advantage. And you might have a particular moment where you do it, or you might have an action sequence where things are going crazy and you want to show things back and forth and flopping all the time. And that creates this like frenetic and visual experience. But then after that's done, I would go back to something a little more consistent. So yeah, there are a couple methods to do that. The main thing is screen direction can be tricky, and you have to practice it. But if you establish a character on one side of the screen, keep that character on that side of the screen through the whole sequence, unless you have a reason to change. That would be my advice there.
Thank you. There is a question from Anastasia. She's the author of the last project that you checked.
Cool.
She's asking about, you mentioned the importance of strategies while searching for a job as a storyboard artist. What kind of strategy would you recommend to approach? What kind of strategies did you approach when you were starting your career?
That's a really good question. There is no one way to do it. I think the traditional way of doing it is you compile a portfolio of samples of story work, and it's very specific. You're not going to show your animation, you're not going to show your figure drawing, you're not going to show your concept art. You're going to show your storyboards in a storyboard portfolio, and you're going to have many examples of storyboards and storyboard sequences that you're showing. Now, it doesn't have to be a really long sequence. It could just be a piece of, let's say, a dramatic sequence or a comedy sequence. You should most likely show off your staging, your camera work, your drawing ability. By showing really nicely drawn storyboards, that shows off your drawing ability. You should also have samples of, by showing the storyboards, you show off your really good perspective, so there should be no doubt in the drawings that you can draw perspective well. Your creativity when it comes to your composition and your camera angles, and you would put all of this in a portfolio book. Now, I still recommend you have, well, first thing you would do, compile it digitally, because that's the easiest way of doing it. You put that in a good presentation. One rule of thumb that I always end up repeating over and over again: don't make your storyboard panels too small. You should have maximum 6 to 9 panels on one page. Anything more than that, there's way too small. You just can't see it. You want to make sure that anybody looking at your portfolio is able to view like all the things I mentioned, like good drawing, composition, all that stuff, with a nice size storyboard panel. Now, you can have multiple on a page. You might even start out your portfolio with like 2, 3, and 4 on one page, so there's more space for your drawings. At any rate, you compile that together. You probably make a PDF copy of it, and that's what gets sent out to these studios. And you start contacting the studios that you are interested in applying for. And you look to see if they have a job posting. You might even connect with these people online through LinkedIn or social media, Instagram, any of these platforms. You connect with the recruiters, and you connect with artists that are working on the story teams. That's one method of doing it. You kind of build a relationship so that you're kind of already introducing yourself as an artist. And then when the time is right, hopefully you can build up enough of a professional relationship so that you can submit your work. And again, you would do this in a professional way. It's nicely presented with a good resume. Everything is nicely packaged. And you would also do your research. Pardon, I have a young daughter who's in the back screaming, but that's also a result of my studio in my house. I'm working from my home. At any rate, you package all this stuff together, and you want to make sure that you're showing all of these things. You do your research on the company that you apply for first, so you know what projects they're going to be going for. Is it a cartoony show? Is it going to be an action show? If it's action, you got to show action in your portfolio. If it's a cartoony kind of kids show, you want to show that kind of material in your portfolio. Those are obviously going to give you your best chances. So things to avoid would be showing generalist work, putting a combination of all the stuff that you've done in your career in one portfolio, that will not apply. This is a very specific niche as a story person. Really, that advice goes for everybody, even if you're an animator or a concept designer or whatever. You're not going to show animation stuff if you're applying for lighting job. It doesn't make sense. You show lighting. For an animator, you show animation, right? For a story artist, you're going to show storyboards. So that's really important. And then the other thing is, just know that this is really hard to get into the business, and you're gonna get rejections. I have hundreds, I don't know. I have a pile of rejection letters I've been, turned down many times. Over the years, it's less, right? And bye-bye. And that's great, because what happens is you build up a network, and then you will have a connection with people, and they'll call you because they know your work. And so it gets easier to actually land these jobs in the future. So doing it as a new artist, it is difficult, and you have to have a nice thick skin and a strong, courage. But know that even though you get rejected, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean they hate you. That doesn't mean your artwork is not good. It just means that particular company or person did not hire you. So then you have to, this is my advice would be, and I'll wrap this up in a second, is my advice would be that if you get rejected, ask yourself, be curious and ask yourself, why? Why did I not get the job? Is it because I didn't have the right stuff in my portfolio? Is it because my drawings aren't good enough? Is it because I'm not showing this and that? If you have the opportunity to ask the people that have turned you down, that's the best, because they will give you really good feedback and tell you exactly why things didn't work out, if that's possible. Good people like Iliana can maybe point you in the right direction and say, hey, you're missing this and this. And then the next time you do it, try again, and you try again, and you try again. And eventually you're going to land the job, and you're constantly updating work, doing new assignments, growing as an artist. All of that is really, really important.
Sergio, thank you very much for all these insights. It's been really pleasure to hear your opinion on everything you mentioned. And just to say again, guys, this book answers lots of questions. Sergio's book,
It's my book.
Professional Storyboarding,
cut
has
off there, but yeah, thanks.
very useful advice on every question we have here in the chat. Actually, we have portfolios and promotion. We have how to look for work. Wonderful chapter on interviews with professional storyboard artists.
Oh, yes.
And I really, really recommend this book to you guys if you want to read it, and come back to us. And Sergio will be probably delighted to continue the talk with you guys.
Yeah.
Storyboard.
I would say too, connect with me if you want on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I'm at Sergio Paez Art, and certainly Storyboard Art. We also have that group there too. And so, yeah, that's a way to get started and stay connected.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergio. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us tonight. And I will give the floor to Antonella to wrap up the session.
Thank you, guys. That was very, very interesting. And so obviously, sorry, we are running out of time, so we are not able to answer all of your questions, guys, but feel free to reach us by email and we will get back to you so as soon as possible. Obviously, then if you want to also find out more about the programs that are starting the next intake, so in June or September, just feel free to get in touch with us. And I will write in the chat my email address, and then obviously I will also send follow-up emails, so feel free to read.
Thank you, Antonella.
Right,
thank you very much, guys. That was very interesting.
Thank you, Sergio. Pixar.